Welcome to Marathon Champions, the podcast where running legends Benji Durden, Bill Rogers, and Ron Tabb share their timeless wisdom on marathon training and inspire listeners with their wealth of experience. These champions continue to impact the running world today.
I got a number of invitations back then from the AAU and later the TAC, and you would get a form, and you just filled it out, and it said what size uniform, right? But I never got the uniform. They would never send. So one time I asked them, I was at the convention, and I asked Olin Castle, I said, well, how come if we go individually and we're still representing our country, right? And we don't get a uniform. He's like, oh no, you don't get a uniform. It has to be a team, and I'm looking at Great Britain. I'm looking at all of these other countries, right? If they're chosen to go overseas, I mean, how much does it cost to give somebody a uniform anyway? I mean,
I got one for running the San Juan 450.
Yeah,
but the singlet they sent was a small, and although I was a lot smaller than I am now back then, I couldn't run it, and I put it on after the race to have a picture taken, but during the race it was not something I could have worn.
I mean, we all had our company sponsors that we needed to run for anyway. So it would have been hard, but if they sent me a USA uniform, I would have worn it. But they wouldn't say, I mean, provided it wasn't, some horrible material or something that wasn't good to run a marathon in.
Well, Bob, you ran for New Balance, and then later you left New Balance. What happened in your life? New Balance basically kind of brought on the Greater Boston Track Club, including
they did, yeah.
Flyers. But what happened after that? After
AW got established, they became like the first in the national club. So everything used to be regional clubs. So Greater Boston, if you lived in New York, you really weren't supposed to be competing outside of your region. So if you weren't supposed to be running for Greater Boston Track Club.
So what did you do?
People would do things to get around that. But anyway, New Balance wanted to start their own national club like AW. So they could recruit runners from, didn't matter where you were from. You ran for New Balance Track Club.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of hurt Greater Boston. But anyway, when I finished third at Boston, I was getting 4,000 or 5,000 from New Balance at that time.
The money was overwhelming. You didn't know what to do with it.
Well, the thing is, I knew what all the other runners they were recruiting. I had a good idea what they were making. I didn't know for sure. I just believed it to be true. But I knew they were all making much more than that. Well, maybe not, twice as much, 10, 15. Some cases maybe more. And so I went in to talk to them about, making more money to New Balance. And they said, well, we'll give you 8,000. And I was like, 8,000? That's still a lot less. I just finished third. I beat these other guys. So Reebok at the time, a person I knew who knew Reebok was just trying to get established here. He came to me and Reebok offered me 12, so I straight away went with Reebok.
Shoe Wars.
That didn't work out great. It's all in my book there too. But anyway, that didn't work out great. But I ran my PR in Reebok shoes, and they were made by Joe Foster, the co-founder of the company. And but then I went back with New Balance. Reebok was pretty much dumping me. They were signing Sidney Marie at the time, and they were just moving on, and we didn't really get along. So, they offered me something, but it wasn't, really. I was considering this is it. My running career might be over if I can't get something. And then New Balance brought me in, and, they were recruiting me heavy because they thought they were in a duel with Reebok, who really didn't want me anyway. But New Balance felt bad when I left in the first place. Like they didn't want me to leave. That was just a rash, being a young person, not being a business person.
Yeah.
That was just kind of like, you're not treating me right.
We didn't have raises. For example, there's some New Balance athletes I know in the Olympic Games will be the world record holder, Sydney McLaughlin, the 400-meter hurdle world record holder. And I believe New Balance pays her $1 million a year. So the money is going up more and more, and maybe it's more visible on the track side of athletics than the marathon side. But
I think it is. I think it
I
is.
can't think of a marathoner that's a New Balance. I know there must be, but I can't think of one.
For New Balance?
Emily Tyson is.
Okay.
Emily Sisson, yeah.
Yeah.
Sisson Tyson, yeah.
Yes. So they have her, and she's American record holder. She's a great athlete, but they don't have the marathon team. They went into the track, and they are at New York City Marathon as a sponsor. They've done great as a small New England company under Jim Davis's leadership, kind of like Phil Knight,
Well, they also had a Molly Huddle,
Yeah.
Ray Tracy down in Providence, he's a New Balance guy. And a lot of the athletes he coaches are all New Balance people. So
under Coogan,
Coach Coogan.
Mark Coogan is separate. He coaches most of the track runners. Ellie, I don't think he coaches any marathoners. Ray Tracy has seemed to get most of the marathon runners. Of course, Emily won the 10K in the last trial, so she's tough.
Going to be interesting. So this time around, I think in the Olympic Games, it's not kicked off by the women's marathon. It's going to finish with the women's marathon in Paris. And the day before, I believe the men run. Is that true? Is that accurate? I don't even know the schedule.
The men run on Saturday, the women run on Sunday.
The final days of the Olympic Games.
Right.
Yeah. You going to be there, Ron?
Yeah. So, Bill, I was flicking through some channels the other day, and I came across the '76 Olympics, and saw the start and finish of the marathon, and talk about uniforms. And I was talking to my wife last night, and I said, "Those were I taped it for. I thought those uniforms in '76 that you guys wore were pretty cool." The USA uniforms.
Yeah.
I've got my uniform. I don't have my singlet and everything, but
what'd you do with your singlet?
He sold it. He sold it outside the stadium.
Back then we traded sometimes too.
Yeah. Well, I know in Helsinki we got multiple uniforms. I traded with Chris Riffle. I traded one of my uniforms with him. Also altered mine because the uniforms sucked.
Yeah,
that was commonly done. You would trade with runners from another country. But I remember going out, I was so disappointed with my race in Montreal, having been injured, and I was given number 1 because I'd run fastest time in the world.
Yeah.
So I gave my number 1 to some little kid. 30 or 40 years later, I got a call, a message, and it got sent back to me. Would you want your number? And I said, sure.
Well, you got your number back?
I got my number back, yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, really.
Excellent.
Someone actually posted a photo somewhere, and I wish I had kept a copy of Bill sitting outside, and there were other athletes. There was like a dozen athletes sitting outside the Olympic Village selling their stuff or portions of their stuff.
But what it was you traded pins. You traded country pins, and I have a pretty big.
I don't know, Bill. This looked like a more commercial venture.
Well, we were pretty poor. I don't know if I remember really selling anything because all we had was we didn't have much, But I think, it was really, for me, I was crushed because I was injured at the race. I'd run well for trials, and then you saw up in the big thing, see you in Moscow. Of course, Moscow never happened. And so it kind of shows you the world we lived in. And it's not too different from today.
But 1 week after Montreal Olympics, Bill ran a 7-mile race in Chelmsford, Mass.
Yeah.
Which I ran, and I was like, I can't believe, because the race director said, "Yeah, Bill's coming." I go, "No, he can't be coming. He just ran a marathon last week."
I was beat up. It wasn't bad. And then I ran Falmouth. That was and Frank came in and whipped me.
Big Frank.
He had a great race in Montreal, except a fellow named Czerpinski from East Germany edged him, possibly with a little assistance.
No, not possibly. There's evidence that he had a little
There's
assistance.
no question.
I don't think there's any doubt about it anymore.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Bobby, when did you set your sights on trying to qualify for the Olympic trials? At what point of your running career did you say,
the day I finished third in the Boston Marathon, I ran 2:12 because I was a 2:28 runner. I ran Boston in 1977. I finished in 46th place in 2:28.
Hot day.
But then after that, I worked pretty hard at it, and you know, I was shooting for like maybe 2:15 was my goal. But I was training hard with Randy and Bill and others. Dickie Mahoney were all running Boston. And so we had a good group. And, you know, I surprised myself a little bit running 2:12:30. But that kind of put me in the frame of mind where, yeah, the Olympic trials are next year. So, you know, I was already training pretty hard and seriously and probably would have been training for the trials. Even if I had bombed at Boston, or as long as I had qualified, I would have probably been there. But after running 2:12, I was one of the top marathoners in the country, at least. I think my time that year was 25th in the world, and in the 6th or 7th among Americans. So anyway, so that's when I started thinking about the trials. Yeah.
Bob,
but you know, the 1980 boycott, that, you know, you have a certain ideal and then something kind of bursts your bubble and you're thinking, okay. I was already thinking about 84 because I was very young then still. I mean, I was 23. So I figured, you know, usually you're kind of hitting your best in your mid to late 20s. Not always.
But 84. Did you run 84?
I ran 84, yeah. You know, it's all timing. I was running great in 1984. I ran a personal best for 5K, 10K. I ran 13:54 on my own. I ran 28:24 at Penn, and ran a 10-miler in Amherst, that hilly course that we love. Broke the course record. I was just running really well, and then I don't know. In the spring, I just started feeling low. You know, I think I overdid my training. I always say if the trials in 84 had been a month earlier, you know, I get allergies a lot in the spring, and they just seem to bother me. Not to make too many excuses, but I finished 17th in 84. I ran 2:18.
Bob, I think to this day, 84 trials, well, it was the first one ever for women, of course, which Joan won, but I think 84 certainly had some of the great depth of any of our trials on the men's.
I'd argue that 80 was pretty good.
80 was good. All of that period from the late 70s to the late 80s or mid 80s, the depth was really good. You know, we've probably never gotten back to that. We have some faster runners, but we've never gotten back to that kind of.
Bob, you ran 88 trials as well, I believe.
I ran 88 trials. I finished 7th.
You were in the hunt
in Waterfront, yeah. I was in the lead pack for over 20 miles. There were 6 of us. And, you know, I really was running well that day. I just, same thing, hamstring. And it was one of those things where I'd be running along fine and then boom. So I'd slow way down, then I'd slowly get going again and boom. And so it was a very frustrating race, but, you know, I knew that was the last time I was going to run the trials. So that was when you finally realize it's, you know, it's over. You make that terrible decision that, you know, you've been banging your head against the wall for years. And now
a very tricky.
Ran a pretty good race, but yeah.
So Bob, you became a writer. You went to
after a fashion. I did.
You went to study work at law firms, and you.
I was a librarian. I got my master's degree. Yeah, and it was a long haul, but I got my undergrad. I went back to school. I did some coaching at what is now UMass Lowell. It's now a Division I school. When I ran there, it was Division III school. I coached the women there for 4 years. I got my undergraduate degree in American Studies. And then I just started looking for a job. I wanted to coach, but it just wasn't a practical thing to do. There's a certain system for college coaching that you come through. And there are some elite athletes that have gotten positions. I can think, Placencia. But, it's, I applied for many jobs, and I wasn't very good at coaching anyway, I have to say. I probably, things worked out, So I just started looking for a job, and I wound up working at the Internal Revenue Service. And they had a job in their library, and I got mentored by, I got a mentor there. And then I eventually got my master's. I was a law librarian for many years, most of my career in libraries, law firm libraries, and then Suffolk University Law School Library. And the last 10 years before I retired, I was in a local public library, director of a local public library.
My point, Bob, is do you think that helped you? I mean, you are a really good writer. You write for publications. You've got your book.
Yeah.
You can write. Do you think it was that?
I don't. I like to try to. I consider my writing more creative writing. I'm not trying to write it straight. Somebody can write everything straight. I like to try to make it entertaining to some extent, because I'm actually reading a great book now. I'll give you a book recommendation. It's Pete Seeger. It's called Chopping Wood, and it's just this friend of his just recorded him telling stories that he told over and over, about his family and his whole life, and the stories are so incredible. Highly recommend it. But that's the kind of thing. I've always been a reader, even when I was poor. One of the reasons I did poorly academically, because I just kind of dropped out. I just did enough to get by. And then I read a lot. I was always a big reader. I spent a lot of time in the library. And so I think I gravitate into writing. I always tried to write some. I always kept journals of my running career, alongside my training log and stuff.
Bob, you have a very extensive site online.
Yeah.
Can you tell us
about
it?
It's not it needs a lot of work. The website, it's just bobhodge.us, but you can read a lot of my stuff there.
Do you still have the training logs up there?
I have the training logs up there. I have Bill's logs transcribed from 73 to 78. If not, his 1976 log is kind of off the charts.
Crazy.
I remember when Bill first gave me his first log, 1973. A friend of mine, Gary Wallace, who also ran with Greater Boston, was a 2:18 marathoner. Gary and I were going through it together, and so what is this? Bill did 2 runs, and then at midnight he went out and ran a mile. What's that all about? And I asked Bill, and he just said, "Oh, I couldn't sleep or something." But he later admitted to me that he had run 19 miles that day, and he couldn't fall asleep because he only ran 19. He had to go out and make it 20.
We marathon types can be a little rigid, a little
anal.
Type A here and there.
But in 1973, that was when Bill first came back into running. So he really, he had this really, it was kind of looked like, one of these like books, and he wrote extensively in it, his training and comments and stuff. In fact, I think he redacted a lot of stuff he didn't want us to see. But anyway,
some of my stuff has been redacted.
Yeah. Don't print that.
Kind of out of control. But but the fun of it is, I think the main thing is we had so much fun, and there's a lot of part of it is the honor. Isn't it true, Benji and Ron? Bob, that's involved. When you're in this kind of a sport, there was no money, but there was something else.
Well, there was some money.
but very little.
Winning or placing well sort of
Yeah.
fed on itself. I mean, if you did well in a race, you got
Yeah.
kind of excited and you're willing to go and push yourself to do better in a race. I mean, if I
Yeah.
had run and just been in the pack for all of my running life, I probably would have quit. Or I'd quit racing maybe.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. It's a hard sport.
Back then, professional running was right around the corner.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, we were, as far as the governing bodies were concerned, we were professionals because we got appearance fees every now and then, and
Right.
And we got prizes that were worth more than the limit, but we weren't really making enough to say, okay, this is what we're doing for a living. It was more of supplementing a living.
Yeah.
I think there's two brothers from Oregon who were doing a documentary about when our sport changed forever in 1981 at the Cascade Runoff, sponsored by Nike, out in Portland, Oregon, and that race where Greg Meyer won, Herb Lindsay was second, and the three New Zealand women took 1, 2, 3, Patty Dillon fourth. Everyone, we were trying to change the sport for the better. And I think that happened that day. That documentary is almost done. And I hope we can see it online. And so the new young runners who are out there today can understand what was going on then, the way, we're trying to talk about it now,
Well, it's amazing how long amateurism hung in there. And to some extent, when I was commenting about these personal services contracts and all the money being invisible, that is a throwback to the amateur days when people got paid under the table.
Yeah. I mean,
it's hard to break out of that model. And these now, they got that model. The athletes seem happy with it. The agents are certainly happy with it. The organizations, the major marathons, are happy with it. So they don't want to make the change. They don't want to run for prize money. If you had $1 million for the first prize, gave everybody the same appearance fee, say $25,000, or just something like a nominal fee, so they wouldn't, if they had to drop out or something, it wouldn't be. Sure. I think it would bring some more excitement to the sport. I don't know.
The races would be more races. It wouldn't be. I don't think you would have rabbits in a race like that.
No, and I don't really want rabbits in the race anyway, especially like Boston.
That's not a real race.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's so great about Boston and New York. No one's going to, there's no rabbits for the most part. And people are just racing. They're racing the course and they're racing each other. And that's really what it should be.
There are no pacers in the Olympics, and you see real marathons and real races, 1500s, and it's just the way it is. But everything changed because of the shoe companies and the setup past times. And that's where doping came in too, more, I think. But
well, no, doping was there a long time before the shoe companies.
Doping's been in our sport since the beginning.
Yeah,
it's just getting more sophisticated,
Yeah, we're not as bad as the cyclists or the weightlifters or the
but the Russians and the East Germans especially, they had perfected cheating to to a level that maybe the rest of us hadn't even thought about. So
we weren't even aware that it was going on at the time, really.
Well, I don't think I ever personally wanted to think about it, because that just would have, destroyed everything. What's the point? I knew there was stuff. I heard rumors and things.
Bob, how do you think the clean athletes feel today when they're going up against some of the well-known people from certain countries where doping is very...
They feel the same way you did, Bill. They just go out there and compete to the best they can. I mean, you knew that Varon might be cheating, but what's it to you? I mean, what could you do about it, right? You just got to go.
I didn't believe Lasse Varon he didn't really blood dope. Blood doping with
he did.
Wasn't banned until after
well, it wasn't banned.
It wasn't illegal, that's true, yeah. It wasn't illegal.
In addition to blood doping, Varon was doing steroids. That was the Finnish program.
Yeah, you're using steroids. And we're also muscular, so
well, the thing that the headband man, Vania, was.
I mean, we thought that steroids were for muscle, and they were if you were taking the right steroids. But they also build your blood. And I know that personally now because, with my radiation treatment for prostate cancer, they had me do anti-testosterone. So my testosterone was blocked. And as a result, my blood values dropped quite a bit. I was just above anemic during that time because my red blood count dropped dramatically because of the testosterone blockers. And as soon as I got off, recovered from that, my values came back up. So the opposite should be true. If you take testosterone, your blood value is fine. And so that's part of the reason people in distances are taking steroids. The other thing is it allows you to recover, and you can train harder. And as you can train harder, you get better.
You go back in time.
I don't want to go back in time.
No.
You had it better.
I can be very, it's interesting to look back now, and I'm still a big fan of the sport, regardless of all the issues we have.